But when we step in the studio, and if you know anything about Boomer, if the show starts at 7:30, Boomer's not sitting down until 7:29, 30 seconds.
That's correct.
And so
yeah.
he's sitting down and he's like, okay, and the credits are rolling. I'm like, man, let's go. And I was so nervous. And literally, he's putting this IFB in, which is the thing in your ear that talks to your producer. He's putting that in as the camera is coming down and taking the two shot of he and I. It's so fun because it's such an exhilarating experience. He's a legend because no one can encapsulate a game in 3 minutes like Chris Berman.
Field Talk Podcast is brought to you by Rhoback. I seriously live in my Rhoback gear, from the hoodies, as you can see right here, to the polos, to their shorts. All I can say is best fit, best feel. And I couldn't be more excited to be working with them on this podcast because they have the most comfortable gear and keep you feeling good no matter the activity or the occasion. Go check them out at Rhoback.com. There are certain faces that you know on TV. There are certain voices you might know on TV. And then there are certain names. And that is the case with today's guest on the Field Talk Podcast, Booger McFarland, a dear friend of mine at ESPN, one of the most respected and versatile voices in all of football. If you follow college football, you know Booger McFarland. If you follow the NFL, you know Booger McFarland. After a successful playing career in which he was a first-round pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which followed a standout career at LSU as a defensive tackle, Booger went on to win 2 Super Bowls playing for one of the most respected coaches in recent NFL vintage, Tony Dungy. But after he hung up the cleats, Booger was looking for the next chapter, and he may not have known it, but it's possible that he has had just about as much success in the world of sports broadcasting as he did during his time as a dominant football player. Really looking forward to having the chance to speak with a 2-time Super Bowl champion and somebody that I hope one day will be my full-time golf buddy. Here's the next episode of the Field Talk Podcast with Booger McFarland from ESPN. There are so many places that we could begin this conversation, but I think there's only one that makes the most logical sense, and that is this, Boog. How does somebody get the nickname Booger?
If I had $1 for every time I've answered that question, I'd probably be retired from ESPN and be working as the honorary starter at the Masters. You know, man, I was a bad kid. Like, growing up in a small rural town in Louisiana, there wasn't a whole lot of jamborees or little playhouses you could go to. So we had to kind of make our own fun and kind of do our own thing. And I got into a lot of mischief. And my mother, who was tremendous, called me a lot of things in her frustration with a little 2-year-old. And one of those things was Booger. And of course, the others I won't be able to repeat on this podcast, but my sister heard the name, and she was 6 years older than me and still is. And so she would tease me about it as I kind of got older through the years. And of course, when somebody teases you about something, it bothers the heck out of you. The more you get frustrated, the more they do it. And I just kept getting frustrated and more frustrated and more frustrated. She just kept doing it and doing it. And everybody started to pick up on it. And, you know, around the town, everybody called me Booger. And so fast forward throughout high school, everyone calls me Boog or Booger. I'm like, man, as soon as I get ready to go to LSU, I said, this is going to be pretty cool. I said, I leave Winsboro. I get to go to Baton Rouge. I get a fresh new start. Nobody would know me by Booger. It'll be Anthony. And I'll never forget the first tackle I made in Tiger Stadium. The announcer came on and said, tackle by Booger McFarland. And I literally said,
Come
what
on,
the hell? And I look up at the press box and I'm like, how did he find out? And at that point, literally in the middle of the first quarter of my very first game, I said, you know what? I'll deal with the rest of my life. And so has it been since, what is that? That was September of 1995, yeah.
Well, I will say this, even if during that moment, during your freshman year when you had aspirations of becoming Anthony, which, by the way, your phone number is saved in my phone, at least, as Anthony. So you are still efforting to make that a reality. And I think that was auto-updated when you changed your profile picture and name. But even though maybe you do have a part of you that wishes there were more people calling you by your legal name, I do imagine that working in an industry that's very public and visible and being part of the biggest sports company of the world, to have kind of like a one-name recognition is kind of unique. Do you think in any way, like just being known as Booger to America has contributed to some of what you've done and accomplished at ESPN?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I do think there's a period where you try to, once you get in this industry, you try to cut through. Like, how can I cut through and become known, become more visible, whether it's your analysis, whether it's your dress. Like, everybody's trying to figure out a way where they can cut through, where they can be top of mind. So I would definitely agree with that because, again, most kids find it funny. Most adults are like, man, why do you go by that? And at the end of the day, once they get past the funny, maybe the gross part, maybe it's, man, why is a grown man called Booger? You still get to the point where you are talking about Anthony McFarland. And I think that for me has always been kind of one of the byproducts of it. Everyone should know, if you don't, when you're from a country town, everybody has a nickname. Like, that's one of the things that people that grew up in the big city usually don't get. Like Mike Greenberg and I always had this conversation. He grew up in New York. He had no idea that watermelons grew on the ground. He thought they grew on vines and trees. And I'm like, yeah, okay. That's something else that when you live in the big city, like, you just don't understand. And so me growing up in the country, like my sister, her nickname was Treetop because she was tall. My brother's nickname was Catfish. Like, everybody had a nickname in the town that I grew up in. And so it's just kind of part of it. But once you get into, I guess, the rest of mainstream America, I found out that everybody doesn't have a nickname. So I'd be curious, Phil Yates.
Yeah.
What was your nickname growing up, and what do people who really, really know you call you now?
Yeah, so I have a name that doesn't really lend itself to a nickname, right? Just because there aren't that many fields out there. I would say the only nickname that has like carried a little bit of, has sort of held up the test of time within my family is Fieldy, which would be a lot of the ladies in my life. My mom, my aunt, now my wife occasionally. Fieldy, yep. And then, as you know, one of your other LSU brethren who has a nickname of his own, Swagoo, Marcus Spears, who has a nickname for, I think, pretty much everybody. He must be from a town sort of like yours. Goes with Babyface for me, which I'm not going to complain about as I start to feel a little older. Hopefully I don't look it, at least. So I got that going for me. But not too many nicknames for me. I think about your name and your presence in the football world, and I think of the word relatability. I think so many people connect with you because maybe there are people that watch you that don't know how accomplished of a career you had. You were one of the greatest players in LSU's history, and that says a lot because even if it was just defensive linemen that had graduated from LSU, it would still be an impressive group. And you're also a two-time Super Bowl champion, a first-round pick who had a great career with the Bucs and then also with the Colts. But that relatability, I think, maybe stems back to the joy that I think you always bring to whatever it is that you do, and you've pretty much covered it all. But I wanted to ask you about the transition from being an athlete and being a very successful one to being a broadcaster and also a very successful one. Was there something that you learned that allowed you to make that transition that if somebody else who is either not an athlete who wants to become a broadcaster or a fellow athlete who does want to follow in your footsteps, you feel like is amongst the best advice you could give?
Yeah, I think what I would say is you really have to be yourself. And I know it sounds simple, so I'll try to expound on it and make it sound really, really complex here. Most of the time, especially when you venture into a very public forum, the words you use, relatability, is something that always strikes with people. Like, we are entertained by people who either make us smile or we can relate to. There was a guy who once told me, he said, next time you're watching TV, he said, next time you're listening to the radio, you can hear people smile. You can hear people and you can see people smile. So catch yourself. If somebody's smiling at you, I guarantee you're going to just crack a smile back. And it's kind of crazy. And then I found myself doing that. Like, the lady was smiling on TV and I was just smiling for no reason when she went to commercial. I'm like, why the hell am I smiling? It's just because the joy that was being brought to my TV through my TV screen was something that really, really engulfed me. And so for me, the best advice that I got was to be yourself, because that's the authentic you. You never have to fake it. Now, there are some people in this industry of television that have created a persona and created a brand that they have to keep on 24 hours a day when they're on television, and they've been very successful with it. And that's fine. I can't do that. Okay. I just know how to be one person, and that's Booger. Early on, it was be authentic, be you. I'm a Southern boy from Winsboro, Louisiana. All right. Most of the words that I say don't sound like the guy that came from New York and went to Princeton. We talk a little different, but I think through it all, we all understand that there's a level of intelligence that each one of us brings in our own way. And so, roundabout answer, Phil, just be yourself. I've always tried to be myself. I try to be authentic. I try to work hard. I think that there are things that are consistent in every walk of life, regardless of the profession, whether it's radio host, football analyst, engineer, teacher, doctor. There are things that are consistent to success. I think authenticity is one. I think hard work. I think dedication. Those things are consistent to regardless of whatever profession you're in. And I've always tried to bring those to whatever platform that I've been in, whether it's been radio, TV, college football, pro football, whatever it is, I've always tried to bring those.
It was kind of a nice chronological order of your broadcasting career that followed your playing career, because you, of course, got your beginnings, at least to my knowledge, in the media space, doing radio down in Tampa. Was that something that you planned when you saw the twilight of your career coming? Did you say to yourself, I got to plant my roots or my seeds with a radio company, or at least have an idea that this could be what I do beyond playing defensive tackle in the NFL? Or was it more along the lines of, I've retired, I've got more time on my hands, I still want to stay busy and make money, what could I do?
It was a combination of, I think, all of that, Phil. I'll kind of walk you through it. I retired, and then I'm kind of playing golf 4 years, 3 or 4 years. I got married, started a family, and it's like, man, I mean, I'm shooting mid to high 70s. I'm feeling really, really good. But at a certain point, there was not enough fulfillment there. There was not enough satisfaction with life. I'm like, this can't be it. Okay, I'm 34 years old. I'm trying to figure this thing out. Like, there's got to be more to it. And it's amazing. That coincided with, when you leave the NFL, part of our benefits package is you get 5 years of free insurance. And then you can purchase another 18 months. So that's 6.5 years that you basically have an insurance plan from the moment you retire. So about the time that 6.5 years started to end, I had a family. And now I got to figure out, okay, I need some benefits, because this single family insurance thing, I've looked into these rates, man, it's not cheap. That coincided with 98.7, which was a small company off of CBS, starting at an all FM sports station in Tampa. And I'm like, okay, guy was like, it doesn't pay much, but you can come audition. CBS has great benefits. Ding, ding, ding. So you mean to tell me I can go and talk on the radio, and I get these benefits that I'm losing with the NFL? Who cares what it pays? I think I made like $50,000. But for the next 2 years, I did CBS radio in the afternoons in Tampa, and I had to learn how to talk about the Lightning, the Rays, obviously talking Buccaneer football. But I had no idea what the red line and the blue line was. I thought offsides was something that I got 10 or 15 times in my career. I had no idea about offsides in hockey. And so it's amazing how those 2 years of local radio, having to put the work in to learn about baseball, and we had Joe Madden at the time, and Joe Madden is one of the kind of quirkiest managers out there, and so there were a ton of things that he did that I had to learn about so I could talk about it intelligently on the radio. I had to learn about Martin St. Louis and Anderchuk and Vinny LeCavalier. I'm like, who the hell are these dudes? Well, these are the people that own the hockey team. And if you want to talk sports in this town and have any credibility, you better learn about them, and you better speak intelligently about them. And so that was what led me to kind of get into the radio space. And the radio space led to the TV space. But it never would have started. I don't know if it ever starts if the NFL CBA had said, you got insurance for life. So we can thank the CBA negotiations from years ago for where I am today. Because if we had insurance for life, I don't know if the motivation for me would have been the same as it was back in, 2013, 2014.
Yeah, so insurance for life for players beyond their career is a very good thing in a lot of ways, but I suppose there was a silver lining to there being that finite period of being covered for insurance. Yeah. I think there are a lot of different buckets of employees at ESPN, but one that I think of is there are some people whose career got started, not literally with one moment, but took a big leap because of a singular moment in which they masterfully described a play or made the announcer on a game of a special buzzer beater or something of that nature. Something that caught all of our collective attention. For you, did you feel like there was that moment where you kind of made your mark on the TV map or the ESPN map, or was it more of a slow build where you're doing radio for Tampa and getting some reps, and ESPN kind of said to themselves, we see something with this guy Booger, maybe we should continue to elevate his platform?
I think it was a slow build, but I do remember a similar moment. It was during, I had been hired by the SEC Network, and I was working in Charlotte, and Les Miles was still the head coach at LSU. And everyone was starting to have conversations about, here's a legendary national championship coach at LSU, and, should they fire him or should they not? And, of course, I was one of the ones, because I knew Les a little bit, and I follow my LSU Tigers a lot. I'm like, yeah, it's time for him to go because he won't change. He just won't change, and he's running the program down. And I was very outspoken about it, and I said it. And Mike Greenberg, who was doing Mike and Mike at the time, was like, hey, who is that guy? Like, he seems to be the guy who's the only guy I know who will say it's time to fire this guy. Maybe we should bring him up. And he invited me up to do Mike and Mike. And I flew the first time ever in Bristol, Connecticut. As far as being inside the building, I came to audition, but first time ever working at ESPN that day, I came and I was on Mike and Mike. And I was one of the only guys who came on Mike and Mike. I put my best suit on and all that good stuff. And we had two great segments, me, him, and Golick. We were just talking, and after the segment, he looked at me and he was like, I need more of that. And that led to anytime Golick would take off, he called me. And so I literally started doing more stuff on the big network, quote unquote ESPN, on Mike and Mike. And so it was on ESPN2 at the time. And so I would come, and for 4 hours, me and Greeny would sit there and look at each other and just talk about whatever. Sometimes it was football. Most of the times it wasn't. And I think the people started to get a breath of fresh air because I didn't know the politics of sports. This was just Mike saying, hey, what do you think about this? And I gave my honest opinion. And so I think that period of time, not just one moment or one day, but that period on Mike and Mike, where Mike Greenberg kind of really just connected with me. And it sounds crazy because here's a guy who grew up in upstate New York, and maybe not upstate, but he grew up in the city of New York. And I told you he thought watermelons grew on vines that hung down from vines in the trees. So we got nothing in common. I mean, we literally have nothing in common, but he and I connected. And we still connect today. We still play golf together today. We still talk about so many different things, but it's amazing how sports brought us together. And it's been one of the most amazing friendships that I've had at ESPN. It's been that way since day one, and it's still that way. So that was kind of the moment for me where I think, because ESPN radio is on throughout the building, and so those four hours where me and Greeny are pontificating throughout the day, people started to hear, and I think more people heard it. And then if there's something college football related, and you know this, Phil, the more you're willing to offer yourself or offer your service up, and just be available. Hey, there's this story. Can you come on? Sure, no problem. I'll come on. Just be available. And that kind of led to people not only wanting to put me on the shows, but even knowing my name. Because, again, the ability to cut through is the toughest thing in our business.
Well, you mentioned your honesty. That was kind of the jumping off point of that last discussion. And I would say being honest about LSU as an LSU grad, when it's negative honesty, is about as challenging of a task as there can be in the media side, because that's a family. And while Les Miles, it was time to go, as you mentioned, is a national champion winning head coach for one of the most decorated college football programs. But that's one of your signature traits, is you don't hold back. You haven't held back on the college level, the pro level, in the studio, in the booth, highlight shows, radio shows, you name it. That can be challenging, especially for former players, because you either know these guys, or I'm pretty sure if Les Miles or some player that you criticize on the Arizona Cardinals and New Orleans Saints wants to get a hold of you, they can probably find a way. The NFL family is fairly small. But what is the both importance of doing that? And was there almost like a walk the plank moment where you told yourself, I'm okay with dealing with those repercussions? Because you know it, like we all do, there are certainly people that are much more reserved in their analysis because they're trying to protect themselves from the possible backlash.
Yeah, I think to put it a simpler way, like there are a lot of people that just want to be liked. And I often said I'd rather be respected than liked. And to me, it sounds kind of, usually you can kind of do both. You can be respected and liked, but there are certain topics or certain things you're going to say where you have to choose. Am I going to criticize a certain player or say a certain thing? Because there's always 2 or 3 different ways to say it. I've never been really good at saying things the roundabout way. So in other words, hey, player X had a bad game. Well, there are certain things he could have done. He could have done better. Maybe he was off his game that day. No. Let's cut through the minutia. Player X played bad today, and if he doesn't play any better, this team can't win. That cuts through. I was told early on in this business, you got to be able to cut through. You got to be able to, whatever it is you feel the strongest about, you say first, and then you have certain points that you can support it with. So yeah, it's a little bit tough. And I think especially when you're just getting started as an analyst. So like the first couple of years, because that's the closest you are to whatever sport that you're analyzing. Like those guys that you're talking about, you either know them personally or you played against them. And so those first couple of years can be challenging. Like now, I'm 46 years old. There isn't any guy in the league that I play with. Most of the people that I know in the league are coaches and GMs. And so it's a lot easier now to talk about these players. And they even reach out more now because now here's what they do. I'll tell you this little story. I'm talking at the NFL draft, and I'm talking about a certain team and a player on that team that hasn't played well. Well, here's the reason why a certain team went out and drafted somebody else, because the player they have on that team at their position hasn't been any good. So that player reached out via Twitter because, again, it's easy to find people now. Hey, man, I'm tired of you saying such and such about my name. I said, hey, no problem. Here's why I said it. They've been disappointed in your play. Well, what do you mean disappointed? I said, here's the numbers. I said, you're being paid $22 million a year, and to get 7 sacks is not good. And so then the emotion comes out. Then they go to attacking me. Well, you weren't that great as a player. This is not about me. Not about me. I'm talking about you. And so I think there was a level of respect there, because I was able to back up my opinion. And which gets back to the point. When you're being an analyst, I think the number one thing you want to do is you have to be honest and you have to be truthful. Those 2 things will allow you to be respected, because it's nothing personal that I'm saying. I don't know these players personally. At least I don't know most of them personally. And so what I see and what I give is just about what I see. And I think as long as you do that, that gives you an opportunity to be respected, and hopefully it brings some longevity to your career. So it's kind of funny that you and I are doing this podcast. So I just got this a couple of days ago. It says
years? 15
10 years.
Let's go.
10 years with Disney.
I got mine right there.
Yeah, exactly. To 10 years with Disney. I now have been at Disney working for ESPN longer than I played. And I think that's the one thing throughout this whole process that I think if I had to list a list of things that I'm proud of, it's not the money, it's not the job that I've had, it's the fact that I've gotten into a second career and done something that I had to work at and had to become, that I wasn't God gifted in my athletic ability. The good Lord gave me 6'1", 300 pounds, the ability to run 4'6", 4'7". He gave me that. But this analyst career and this NFL and college stuff, I had to work in. I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of.
I know you were 6'1", 300 when you were playing. I'm giving you like 235 these days. Because I tell you what now, you want to be a D tackle, but I think I can get 12 snaps out of you at like off-ball linebacker if I needed you today. I know you'd say no way, but I see you in the Sunday in the war room where everybody else is eating. That's where we watch our games at ESPN. People are sitting there devouring wings and pizza and everything in between, and you're sitting there on like, cashews and like a Smart Water. So
nothing changes. Cashews right here, Phil. Nothing changes, buddy.
There you go. See, these details don't go by me. You've done everything at ESPN pretty much, and not just football. You talked about Mike and Mike and other shows that have touched on topics that aren't football. Is there something that you've done, a role that you've held that you felt was most gratifying to you? Is it NFL versus college? Is it you and Boomer obviously are on prime time now on Sundays? Is it doing radio? Is there something that maybe has risen above the rest that you felt most gratified or fulfilled during your media career?
Yes, I enjoy having meaningful conversations with people. And I think when you look at what I've done on Saturdays with Kevin Nagandi, we spend 9 hours together every Saturday. Chris Berman and I, we watch football games and then we do a show every Sunday. Those meaningful conversations have meant the most with me. That I probably did 50 Mike and Mike shows during my career. Those 4 hours that I spent with Mike Greenberg were the best because it's something about being able to discuss or have a conversation with somebody, regardless of the topic, to be able to agree or disagree, to be able to learn something, respect the other's opinion, and then you move on. Like, this is not rocket. So, I mean, I'm not solving the world's problems. I'm just trying to learn something. I'm trying to educate. And at the end of the day, the E in ESPN stands for entertainment. And if I can do all those different things, man, that's when I'm most fulfilled. Like, people make this thing way too complicated. Like, this is fun. This is sports. Tell me what you think. Here's what I think. You like it. I like it. You don't like it. I don't like it. Let's move on. Those are the conversations that I really, really enjoy. I enjoy interesting things. Mike Greenberg told me years ago, I'm in the business of being interesting. That's it. I want to have interesting things to say, and I want to hear interesting things. So that's just an example of the things that kind of jump out and stand out to me the most.
You mentioned Chris Berman. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Boom. And I have the great honor of sitting on Sundays with you and Boom. And the number has whittled over the years, but probably 25 or so of us in the war room on Sundays. It used to be closer to about double that. But of course, you and Boom do prime time on Sunday nights. It is one of the most iconic shows in ESPN's history. And you had big shoes to fill as Tom Jackson and TJ and Boom had a legendary run. But Boom is one of a kind, and in so many ways. Is there something either that you learned or a story that kind of exemplifies what it's like to have the experience of sharing a set with perhaps the most well-known football highlights man in the history of the league?
Yeah, I've watched that show for years, and I'll never forget the first time I got a chance to do it. It was amazing because I wanted to know how the sausage was made. I wanted to know, how could he do this? How could he have all these nicknames, these funny sayings? How could he do all this while at the same time reading a shot sheet? So for people that don't know, he's actually got a screen in front of him, but somebody has given him a shot sheet to tell him what happened on that play. So he's got a piece of paper. He's got to look at the screen with a piece of paper. Meanwhile, I'm sitting this way. I'm sitting to his left, and he's got to make sure that I'm involved in it. It's amazing how he did it. It's amazing how he does it. And I found myself in awe the very first time. He's talking about a highlight, and there's Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and then he lays out. And the first time he laid out, he was laying out for me. Well, I was looking at him, and he was like, and so he's like, come on with it. And so once I got the rhythm, it's been amazing. Like, we don't even talk about the show. I just know based on and it's going to sound crazy, but you'll get this. I know based on his cadence, his rhythm, his breathing, when he's about to start and when he's about to stop talking. And so I can literally, I don't even have to look at it. I can hear him, and I can know when he's about to say X, and I know when to get in. And to me, that's the fun part of what we do, because we genuinely don't rehearse. We genuinely look at the highlights maybe once. But when we step in the studio, and if you know anything about Boomer, if the show starts at 7:30, Boomer's not sitting down until 7:29, 30 seconds.
That's correct.
And so he's sitting down, and he's like, okay, and the credits are rolling. I'm like, man, let's go. And I was so nervous. And literally, he's putting this IFB in, which is the thing in your ear that talks to your producer. He's putting that in as the camera is coming down and taking the two shot of he and I. And it's so fun because it's such an exhilarating experience. He's a legend because no one can encapsulate a game in 3 minutes like Chris Berman. And that's all the NFL gives you. They give you 3 minutes each game, just so you know, just to bring you behind the scenes. Every game, you got 3 minutes to do the highlights, and then you got to go into the next game. You can't go 3:30. You can't go 3:40. You have 3 minutes that's written in the contract. And so he does that at a phenomenal pace, and he does a phenomenal job.
Yeah, he really is one of a kind, and you guys are a dynamic duo on Sundays. It's my favorite highlight show ever. I love watching it. Even for someone like myself who gets the opportunity to watch all of the games, there is nothing like Sunday NFL prime time, which you, of course, as a company man, Boog, I can tell you can watch Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday on ESPN Plus as well. Anthony Booger McFarland, the brother of Catfish and Treetop McFarland. It was an honor having the chance to talk to you. You know how much I love you and respect you as a friend. We talk about football all the time, but I'm glad I had the chance here on the Field Talk podcast to learn a little bit more about your journey and how you have become, as I said, one of the most, if not the most relatable football analysts to America. So I appreciate you very much here, Boog.
Hey, man, glad to have me on. Glad to be a part of Team Rollback. Understand this field. Our relationship goes far beyond football. I'm so proud of you. Not of your golf game, because I haven't seen much of that, but proud of you. You've become a father in the last few years. And for us to have those discussions and to see you grow from the person who I met, who I saw the picture of that has a neck probably that big back in that photo, to where you are now. You've created a space. You're creating more space in the NFL draft. We all know about the fantasy stuff, but the thing I'm most proud of you about is the fact that you're now a dad and you now get to experience what a lot of us have experienced for a number of years. Continued success, my friend.
Yeah, I lean on you a lot for the dad advice, and that won't change anytime soon. Booger McFarland, everybody, the absolute best. I guess the sign of a good conversation is when you have one with one of your closest friends at work, and you feel like you learned a whole lot about that person that you didn't know. And that was the case for me with Booger McFarland, someone I've known for over a decade, and yet I feel like I know so much more after 30 minutes of chatting with him here on the Field Talk podcast. Of course, a huge thanks to Booger and the great folks over at Roback who make this podcast possible. If you haven't yet, go check out all the incredible gear. I, of course, wear a hoodie pretty much every day from Roback. Joggers, shorts, tees, polos, you name it. It's all available over at roback.com. And of course, if you enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe to the Field Talk podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's an easy way to keep up with all the newest episodes. And if you're enjoying it, or even if you're not, a review is always appreciated as well. Again, big thanks to Booger McFarland. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you all again sometime soon here on the Field Talk podcast.